Hey there, internet friends. Trevor Starkey here from TrevorTrove.com with my first installment of Movie Mondays, where I tackle movies that I've seen, big blockbuster movies that have come out, or some of my favorite movies from the past. To kick things off, I'm going to dive into Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. I've seen it twice now, and I think I put it up above the original Guardians of the Galaxy, which was phenomenal in its own right. The first Guardians, you had great direction from James Gunn, a stellar cast. You had a great story, fun origin, bringing all these ruffians together. Incredible soundtrack and just great design. Brought everything together for one of the best movies in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and a good movie all around. And I think because you don't have to do the legwork of setting up those characters and those dynamics and those relationships in this sequel, James Gunn was able to just kind of build on it and go forward and hit the ground running. Here's the part of the video where I give you the blanket spoiler warning. I'm going to be talking about things in the movie, so if you haven't seen it yet and that bothers you, maybe turn this off, go watch the movie, and then come back. You can like the video before you go, though, and subscribe and do all that cool stuff. So the story of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 kind of answers the central question that we had in the first movie of who is Star-Lord's dad. We were introduced to Jeff Bridges as the living planet Ego very early on. He comes and finds Peter and takes them to his planet to kind of say, hey, Peter, yeah, you're my son, and I've got plans for you. We're going to change the galaxy together because you are basically a god. Little g. As a B plot, the Guardians are also kind of on the run from the Sovereign, who are a new kind of alien race in this one, shown as golden creatures of like living perfection. They've been genetically modified to be the best of the best. But they all suck at video game aerial combat, apparently. None of them should really be playing Galaga like that guy from the Avengers. Unlike the first Guardians of the Galaxy, which had a very clear and very publicized we're trying to save the galaxy storyline, Guardians 2 is much more character-centric. There's definitely a, like, we need to save the galaxy thing again, but it's much more self-contained within the story that the Guardians themselves are kind of going through. And it's a much more personal story, which, much like Civil War before it, kind of is a nice change of pace from the, oh, the world is always ending kind of storylines that we've been getting used to in the Marvel Universe. And with Infinity War on the horizon, where literally everything is on the line, it was nice to kind of have a quieter moment. Even though it is a much larger universe-threatening plot that Ego has in mind, we don't really get to see that so much as we do the personal conflict of Star-Lord and Ego. Which brings me to the characters. The characters are phenomenal all around. You had all the Guardians from the last movie returning and all shining brightly. You had some of the ancillary characters from the last movie kind of taking a center stage, and you also have some new characters coming in and immediately fitting right in with everybody else. Because the movie is a much smaller kind of feel, it splits up the Guardians into smaller groups throughout, and so you have a lot of great dynamic pairings throughout the movie. Some of the highlights for me: Star-Lord and Ego, of course. Everything you have when Chris Pratt and Jeff Bridges are on screen together is great. Both of them bring great nuance and flavor and humor to their respective characters. And then when you have the turn in the second act where Ego kind of reveals that he's not the great guy that he's presented himself as, you give Chris Pratt a lot of fun other colors and layers to play with that really flesh out the character instead of making him just kind of always the wisecracking smartass that he is. There's a lot of good growth between Gamora and Nebula as well, and showing their kind of sibling rivalry that they've had throughout the years. We get a lot of more backstory from both of them to kind of discover that both of them were looking for each other, connection in each other, but neither of them could make the first move, so it was just kind of always a rivalry between them. And you kind of get nice little... They're not great at the end of the movie, but they're on the trajectory of being better. Dave Bautista continues to be great as Drax, and in this movie he's partnered up with newcomer Mantis, so you have Drax, this character who's super literal and has very little in the way of social norms that he abides by, along with Mantis, who is completely socially awkward in another way because she's never dealt with anybody. But on the flip side of Drax's obliviousness, she is super empathic. So the comedy that comes from, like, Mantis trying to smile because she thinks that's what people are supposed to do, and Drax not liking it at all, but then Drax playing a practical joke on Mantis by having her pet Rocket, who of course is going to hate it. The pairing of Drax and Mantis also brings one of my favorite, most beautiful, touching moments in the film, when Drax is remembering his lost daughter, and Mantis uses her empathic ability to touch him, and he's very stoic and stone-faced like we're used to seeing Drax, and she touches him and just immediately breaks down in tears and shows you just how much turmoil he's really in, even if we don't get to see it. And he's just living with that kind of all the time. Beautiful moment, and just immaculately handled. The hidden heart of the movie ends up coming from Rocket and Yondu. Yondu, being kind of an ancillary character in the first movie, really gets the spotlight, and Michael Rooker does a great job and runs with it in this film. Easily, some of the best moments come in what Yondu is able to bring to the team. And then, of course, you also have, as an aside, all of the stuff between Yondu and Peter, where we kind of get to see, again, them revisit the idea that Yondu was basically a surrogate father for Peter in raising Peter to be one of the Ravagers, and giving him kind of a code to live by, even if it wasn't the noblest of codes. You have that beautiful moment at Yondu's end where he talks about Ego may have been Peter's father, but Yondu was his daddy, and does it in his lovely, wonderful, for some reason, southern drawl, and kicks off the gut-wrenching, emotional final moments of the film. And then, of course, you have Baby Groot, who shines in every little moment he's given. From the opening sequence when the rest of the team is fighting this giant space squid thing, to the sequence in the middle of the movie where Groot is tasked with getting a new fin for Yondu's head so he can control his arrow thing again, and Groot just has a nice, lovely string of getting the wrong things because he's now a child and doesn't understand. And all in all, like, every character has a great moment to shine, just like in the first one, and you have even more character moments strewn throughout Guardians 2, which is somebody who loves character somewhat over plot. That was right up my alley. The one element of Guardians 2 that I think is a little bit weaker compared to its predecessor is the soundtrack, but it makes up for it. The soundtrack doesn't have as many memorable hits, or certainly is nothing near as recognizable to me, to my generation at least, as the first episode did, but the way music is used in this one, I think, shines brighter than it did in the first movie. The first movie, it was great, like nostalgia for the 80s. This one, the songs speak to what's happening, I think, better in a more direct and more thematic way. You still have great moments like the opening sequence, again, with Groot and dancing to Mr. Blue Sky. But then you have the more narrative-driven moments like Brandy and Father and Son that really just add so much to the story, as well as the emotional resonance of the final 10 minutes of the movie. Cat Stevens' Father and Son and the whole Yondu funeral sequence was just beautiful, and seeing it twice now, both times, brought tears to my eyes. The songs in Volume 2 didn't have as many, oh yeah, I know that song moments, at least for me, as Guardians 1 did. But again, the way the songs were used, choice A1. So yeah, overall, I really enjoyed Guardians of the Galaxy. Great humor throughout. The humor definitely takes more of a shotgun approach in this volume, where you have a lot of jokes being thrown at the wall, and they're hoping as many stick as can. But even the misses, for me, still had me smiling. But yeah, Guardians of the Galaxy 2, great all-around movie, building on the characters that you grew to love in that first movie, and kind of taking them up to the next level, which is exactly what I'm looking for in a sequel. I'm not looking for a sequel that gives you the first movie paint by the numbers. I'm looking for something that takes what you had and builds upon it. And Guardians 2, I think, did that with its characters, with the world building. You get to see in this one how kind of the characters travel immense distances with all the world hopping and stuff. Great movie. I highly recommend it. Go check it out. So let me know what you thought of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, all that fun YouTube stuff. I've been your host, Trevor Starkey from TrevorTrove.com. You can follow me at SnarkyStarkey on Twitter. Next week, I will be delving into the Fast and the Furious franchise. If you were following me along on Twitter a couple weeks ago, I did a whole marathon through of all 8 of those films. And so I'm going to go ahead and spend some time talking about it. And from here at the Trove,